Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A quiet town wrapped in forest and river fog. But in 1966, something arrived here. Something with massive wings, glowing red eyes, and a voice that sounded like metal tearing. They called it the Mothman. On November 15, 1966, two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Millette, were driving near an abandoned wartime facility known as the TNT plant. It was a local hangout spot, a place of dark roads and overgrown concrete domes left over from World War II. But what they saw behind the trees that night changed Point Pleasant forever. Peering out from the shadows of a generator building was a figure. They described a creature, nearly 7 feet tall, with its wings folded behind its back. Its most terrifying feature, however, was its eyes. They weren't just red. They were huge, round, and burned like furnaces, reflecting the car's headlights with an otherworldly glow. When it stepped toward them, it didn't walk. It unfolded its wings, estimated to be 10 feet across, and hovered above the ground without a single flap. Panic set in. Roger Scarberry slammed his foot on the gas, and the car sped away, tires screeching on the gravel. But as they looked in the rearview mirror, the creature was right behind them. It chased their car, effortlessly keeping up as the speedometer climbed to over 100 miles per hour, its wings never seeming to beat the air. It followed them all the way to the city limits before veering off into the darkness. Just hours after that first, terrifying sighting, a local man named Newell Partridge was at home watching television when his TV screen suddenly went dark, filled with a strange herringbone pattern. At the same moment, his dog Bandit began to howl from the porch. Partridge grabbed a flashlight and went outside. He saw two enormous red eyes staring back at him from the darkness of a nearby field. Bandit, a brave German shepherd, shot off the porch and straight toward the lights. Partridge, frozen with fear, ran back inside. The dog was never seen again. The next day, another dog was found dead. Its bones were crushed, its chest was torn open, but there was reportedly no blood left in the body. A strange silence began to fall over the region. Residents woke to find the woods unnervingly quiet. No birds sang, no insects chirped. Even the town's stray dogs, usually a constant presence, stayed hidden. And as the fear grew, a common story emerged from different households. The terrifying feeling of being watched, only to look out the window and see two red eyes staring back from the darkness. Over the next 13 months, the Mothman phenomenon exploded. More than 100 people reported seeing the creature. The sightings were consistent, yet each one was uniquely terrifying. Some saw it standing motionless in the middle of the road, a towering dark silhouette against their headlights, only for it to suddenly lift straight up into the air and disappear without a sound. Others heard it screeching high above their houses, a horrifying noise that witnesses struggled to describe, often comparing it to a generator's whine or the sound of metal bending and tearing. One family claimed it landed directly on their roof. They said the entire house vibrated as if from a small earthquake, and they swore the walls themselves seemed to breathe in and out with each powerful, unseen flap of its wings. The town was living in a state of constant, low-grade terror, never knowing where the creature would appear next. But the horror wasn't just external. Rumors began to spread that seeing the Mothman did something to you, that it left a psychic scar. People who encountered the creature reported suffering from intense headaches, crippling anxiety, and vivid, recurring nightmares. The visions were often strangely specific, images of churning water, raging fire, and the horrifying sight of collapsing steel structures. Some whispered that it could enter your dreams. One woman claimed she woke up completely paralyzed, unable to move or scream. A tall shadow with wings stood at the foot of her bed. It leaned over her, and she heard a voice in her mind, a cold, metallic whisper that said, "Not yet." Skeptics and doctors explained these experiences away as simple sleep paralysis, a common and harmless phenomenon. But for the terrified locals of Point Pleasant, it felt like something far more sinister. They called it a warning. The epicenter of these events was the TNT area, the sprawling, abandoned weapons facility where the first sighting occurred. It was a maze of concrete domes, originally designed as explosive storage bunkers, now left to decay in the overgrown woods. Locals claimed this desolate place was the creature's home. Some who dared to venture near the tunnels reported hearing a deep, guttural breathing echoing from within. Others heard what sounded like heavy footsteps on the concrete floors, followed by the unfurling of massive wings. And then, an unnerving silence. One local legend tells of a group of teenagers who went exploring the bunkers on a dare. Only 2 of them came out, pale and shaking. The others refused to speak of what they saw inside, but their friends and family swore their hair turned snow white within a week. The TNT area became a place of pure dread, a man-made ruin that now housed something ancient and unknown. As if a giant winged monster wasn't enough, something else began happening in the skies above Point Pleasant. UFO sightings skyrocketed during the 13 months of the Mothman flap. Strange, silent lights were seen hovering over the Ohio River. Cars would mysteriously stall on the roads, their engines and radios dying simultaneously, only to restart moments after a strange craft passed overhead. And soon, they arrived. The men in black. These weren't government agents. Witnesses described them as something else entirely. They visited witnesses at night, always unannounced. They wore immaculate black suits and shiny black shoes, even in the muddiest of fields. Their faces were pale and expressionless, and their voices were flat, monotone, and robotic. One witness said, their eyes were wrong. There were no pupils, just dark. They moved unnaturally, with a stiff, awkward gait. When asked who they worked for, they would sometimes offer a smile that was too wide, too unnatural, and simply say, "We handle things that shouldn't be seen." They seemed more interested in intimidation and confusion than in gathering information, leaving witnesses more terrified than before. But all of this, the sightings, the warnings, the nightmares, were leading to one single, catastrophic moment. The greatest tragedy in Point Pleasant's history. When the silence finally broke, it was the sound of steel cracking. The Silver Bridge, a 700-foot suspension bridge, a lifeline connecting thousands of people across the Ohio River, between Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Gallipolis, Ohio. But this steel marvel was also the stage for one of the darkest, most terrifying nights in American history. A night that would forever blur the line between tragedy and terror. On December 15, 1967, the clock ticked past 5 in the evening. It was rush hour. The bridge was packed with cars, people heading home for the holidays, families looking forward to a warm dinner. At 5:04 p.m., without warning, the world came crashing down. In just a few seconds, the entire structure groaned, twisted, and plunged into the icy black water of the Ohio River. Cars, trucks, and people were swallowed by the river. They drowned, were crushed by tons of twisted metal, or simply vanished into the murky depths, never to be seen again. 46 people lost their lives that day. 46 souls gone in an instant. There was no storm, no earthquake, no obvious reason for such a sudden, catastrophic failure. Investigators later pointed to a tiny stress crack in a single eye bar, a flaw that had grown over decades until it could no longer hold the immense weight. But the townspeople of Point Pleasant didn't believe it was just an accident. They believed something had been watching, something had been waiting. They believed they had been warned. For over a year leading up to the collapse, strange reports had flooded the local police station and newspaper. Dozens of people, ordinary, credible citizens, reported seeing a monstrous creature in and around the town. They called it the Mothman. They described it as a 7-foot-tall, man-shaped figure, with a massive 10-foot wingspan and large glowing red eyes that seemed to burn right through you. In the weeks just before the disaster, the sightings became more frequent, more ominous. Several people claim they saw the Mothman perched high on the silver bridge itself. Sometimes at dawn, sometimes at dusk, just watching the traffic flow beneath it. One truck driver gave a chilling account. He said that one night, as he approached the bridge, the creature stood right in the middle of the road. Its leathery wings spread wide, as if it were blocking the path, as if it were waiting for something. He swerved, terrified, and sped away. When the bridge finally fell, several survivors who were pulled from the freezing water swore they saw a dark, winged figure rise from the chaos, ascend silently into the sky, and vanish into the heavy, overcast clouds. It was as if its work there was done. In the aftermath, a chilling theory began to spread through the grieving town, whispered in hushed tones. The Mothman doesn't cause disaster, it's a harbinger of it. It doesn't bring death, it marks it. This creature, this supernatural entity, is drawn to the scent of impending doom. It appears just before a tragedy, feeding on the raw emotions of panic, grief, and fear that permeate the air. Some believe it acts as a collector, absorbing the psychic energy released by mass death. Others hold a more sympathetic view, suggesting it's a messenger, trying to warn those who are vulnerable, though its warnings are often misunderstood or too late. After the collapse, the strangeness in Point Pleasant didn't stop, it mutated. Stories began to surface of people disappearing near the old TNT area, the woods and riverbanks where the Mothman was most frequently seen. Search parties, scouring the dense forests, reported bizarre and unsettling findings. They found footprints in the mud that would start in the middle of a clearing and end just as abruptly, as if the person had been lifted straight into the air. They found deep scratch marks on tree trunks, 12 feet off the ground, far too high for any local animal. One searcher found a cluster of strange, dark red feathers soaked in river water, unlike any bird native to the region. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was a single shoe, found half buried in the riverbank, that looked like it had been melted from the inside out. The leather warped and burned as if by an intense, internal heat. One old fisherman out on the river late one night claimed he saw a human-shaped shadow moving beneath the water's surface, and for a terrifying moment he saw what looked like wings spreading out in the mud before it disappeared into the dark. Years passed, and the story of the Mothman could have faded into local folklore. But then, it started appearing again and again. Not just in West Virginia, but all over the world, always preceding a major catastrophe. Reports surfaced from Russia in 1986, with witnesses describing a large, dark, winged creature flying over the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the days before its catastrophic meltdown. It was seen in Japan before the devastating Fukushima disaster, between 2017 and 2020. Chicago was plagued by dozens of sightings of a similar winged humanoid, leaving residents on edge, wondering what terrible event was on the horizon. The creature seems to travel from one disaster to the next, a silent observer, forever watching, feeding, waiting. Today, some say the Mothman still visits Point Pleasant. The sightings aren't as frequent, but they happen just enough to keep the old fears alive. Locals know to avoid the river after sunset. Hikers trekking through the woods claim to see a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at them from the deep fog. Late-night drivers on lonely country roads sometimes tell stories of something heavy landing on the roofs of their cars with a sickening thud, only to be gone when they slam on the brakes and look. Tourists visiting the Mothman statue in town have reported hearing the distinct sound of leathery wings flapping right above them, even when the sky is perfectly clear and still. There's an old legend in town, a warning passed down through generations. If you're walking in the forest, and you hear a metallic screeching sound right behind you, like grinding steel, don't turn around, just keep walking. He only hunts those who look. The Mothman is not just a myth, it is a warning, a shadow, a prophecy written in fear. This is Tales of the Dark, where legends breathe and nightmares walk right beside us. Subscribe if you dare.